My name is Alara Wynn, and I was 28 when I returned home from a national security mission only to find my son unconscious by our front door. The evening air was cold, heavy, still carrying the metallic scent of the base I had left just hours earlier. My boots had barely crossed the threshold when my breath froze in my chest. Liam, my 6-year-old, was lying on the floor, his small hand curled against the wood, his cheek pressed to the tile. His backpack was still on one shoulder, as if he collapsed mid-step. For a second, the world tilted. Liam? My voice cracked as I dropped to my knees, shaking him gently. No response, just a tiny, strained exhale. Behind me, a familiar voice spoke with chilling calm. "Don't overreact," my husband said. I turned to find him leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed, completely unfazed. "I just disciplined him. He'll wake up eventually." Eventually. As if this were normal. As if our son lying unconscious was an inconvenience. My pulse snapped from cold to burning. I scooped Liam into my arms and reached for my phone with trembling fingers. "I'm calling an ambulance." My husband rolled his eyes. "Always dramatic, Alara. No wonder they send you out on missions. You're too intense to handle home life." I ignored him, pressing the emergency number so hard my thumb hurt. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the doorway red and white. A paramedic rushed in, kneeling beside me, checking Liam's pulse. Then he looked up at my husband, and everything changed. His face went pale. His hand froze midair. He leaned closer to me and whispered, barely audible, "Ma'am, is that really your husband?" Because actually, he didn't finish. Because the truth behind that unfinished sentence was about to detonate everything I thought I knew. The paramedic's unfinished sentence hung in the air like a crack in glass, thin, trembling, ready to break everything open. I felt my heart thud against my ribs as I looked at him. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on my husband, as if he were staring at a threat, not a man. My husband's posture shifted, not nervous, not scared, but irritated. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice clipped, too controlled. The paramedic swallowed hard. "We will talk outside," he murmured to me, almost pleading. But I wasn't moving. Not without understanding why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He checked Liam's vitals again, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint beeping from his portable monitor and my son's shallow breaths. Finally, the paramedic stood. "We're transporting him immediately. He needs oxygen on the way." I nodded, holding Liam tight. My husband didn't move, didn't offer help, didn't even pretend to care. Instead, he muttered, "See? This is what happens when you're weak with him." I almost dropped Liam. Weak? For caring about my unconscious child? The paramedic stiffened. He stepped between us, something no medical worker does without a reason. "Sir," he said quietly, "you should stay here." My husband's eyes darkened. A slow smile touched his lips, the kind I had always ignored, always rationalized away. And why would I do that? The paramedic didn't answer aloud. He only looked at me, his voice barely above a breath. "Ma'am." I recognize him. A chill shot down my spine. "From where?" I asked. He exhaled, a trembling, heavy release of truth. "From a case file. A restricted one." My husband's expression shifted. Not to fear, but to something more dangerous. Recognition. He knew exactly what file the paramedic was talking about. And that was the moment I understood. The danger in my home didn't enter tonight. It had been living here with me. The hallway felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves had leaned in to listen. The paramedic's words kept replaying in my mind. From a case file. A restricted one. My husband's shoulders rose slightly, the way they did when he prepared for confrontation. Not fear, calculation. A quiet readiness that made the hairs at the back of my neck stand. I held Liam closer. His tiny body felt too light in my arms, too still. The paramedic stepped toward me. "Ma'am, for your safety, please come with us now." My husband took one step forward. Just one. But it was enough to freeze the air. His voice dropped to a low, cold rhythm.
Alara.
You're not leaving this house without talking to me first. I met his eyes, something I avoided for years without realizing why. Tonight, they looked different. Too sharp.
Too aware.
My son is unconscious, I said, my voice steady even though my pulse raced. We're going. The paramedic touched my elbow gently, guiding me toward the door. But my husband moved faster than I expected, blocking the exit with chilling ease. You heard something you shouldn't have, he murmured. The paramedic's hand subtly shifted toward his radio. Sir, step aside. My husband smiled, that same composed, unsettling smile I had mistaken for confidence our entire marriage. I told you, he said quietly. I disciplined him. That's allowed in my house. The paramedic shook his head slowly. Not when it matches the patterns we've seen before. I froze. Patterns? He glanced at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen from a stranger in a long time. Concern. Your husband, he whispered, was part of an ongoing investigation. One that never closed. My stomach dropped. My husband straightened his spine, jaw tightening. And then he spoke a sentence that made my blood run cold. You should have never come home early, Alara. For a moment, the world narrowed to 3 people in a doorway. A trembling paramedic, a silent, unconscious child in my arms, and a man I suddenly realized I didn't know at all. My husband's voice was low, deliberate, almost rehearsed. You should have never come home early, Alara. The paramedic shifted, stepping half in front of me. Protective, instinctive. He kept his voice steady. Sir, the ambulance is waiting. We need to move the child now. My husband tilted his head with unsettling calm. Liam's fine. He's always fine. His eyes flicked to the paramedic. But you weren't supposed to see us tonight. A chill climbed my spine. He wasn't talking about the discipline. He was talking about the recognition. The paramedic's voice dropped to a soft warning. Sir, you need to step back. Right now. My husband didn't budge. He looked at me, truly looked, and for the first time, I saw the truth behind his carefully composed facade. Control. Monitoring. Calculated gentleness that had always felt slightly off. Memories flashed. His insistence that I avoid visitors. His discomfort when neighbors said hi to Liam. His anger when I changed my schedule without telling him. The way he always dismissed my son's bruises as clumsiness. Pieces that never made sense were clicking together in a horrifying mosaic. My husband took another step. Alara, give me the boy. I tightened my hold around Liam instinctively, feeling his soft hair against my cheek. The paramedic tapped his radio. Unit 4 requesting immediate police backup. My husband's smile faded. For the first time, his mask slipped. You don't understand, he said, his voice cracking at the edges. I've kept everything hidden for years. You're going to ruin it. Hidden? My throat dried. Hidden what? I whispered. He didn't answer. Because suddenly, multiple sets of footsteps thundered up the porch. Uniforms. Flashlights. Voices calling out. Police. My husband's expression twisted. Not anger, not fear, something far more dangerous. Exposure. Alara, he whispered. Don't let them take me. But I already knew. Whatever he was hiding wasn't something I could protect. And the moment the officers reached for him, everything detonated. The officers stormed through the doorway with swift, practiced movements. Flashlights swept across the hall, landing on my husband, who suddenly looked smaller, cornered, like an animal realizing the trap it thought it built was actually closing around him. Hands where we can see them, an officer shouted. My husband raised his hand slowly, but his eyes never left mine. Not pleading. Not apologizing. Just calculating. The paramedic stepped aside, positioning himself between us again. Officer, he said quickly, the child is unresponsive. Likely oxygen deprivation. We need to go. One officer nodded and radioed for medical clearance, but another approached my husband with icy calm. Sir, we have reason to detain you for questioning. My husband let out a bitter laugh. Questioning? Based on what? My wife's dramatics? That paramedic's imagination? But the lead officer didn't flinch. He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket, a printed photo clipped to a small report. My husband's face went blank. The officer held it up. You were flagged in a protective services investigation 2 years ago. Same patterns, same injuries, same behavioral reports. My breath caught.
2 years ago.
Before Liam was even walking steadily. Before I started national mission rotations. Before the bruises I kept trying to explain away. My husband swallowed hard. That case was dismissed. The officer shook his head. It was closed due to lack of cooperation. He glanced at me. The mother never knew. A hollow ache spread through my chest, the kind that comes from realizing the truth should have been told to you long before the damage began. My husband's voice cracked, not with guilt, but with urgency. Alara, say something. Tell them I'm a good father. I looked at him, really looked, and felt the weight of every missed sign, every silenced instinct, every moment Liam flinched for reasons I didn't understand. My voice finally came out, soft but unshakable. A good father doesn't hide investigations. His expression shattered. The officer stepped in, reaching for his wrists. And that's when he shouted something that made the entire room stop cold. If they dig deeper, they'll find the rest. The rest? The paramedic and the officers exchanged quick, sharp looks. Because his words meant only one thing. There was far more hidden than any of us knew. The room snapped into a deeper silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, but loaded. My husband's words echoed like a warning shot. If they dig deeper, they'll find the rest. The lead officer stiffened. The paramedic froze mid-breath. Even the other officers exchanged tense glances, as though a door they weren't planning to open had just swung wide on its own. My husband realized he'd spoken too much. He shut his mouth quickly, but it was too late. The truth he'd tried to bury had finally surfaced. The officer stepped forward. What exactly will we find, sir? My husband straightened with sudden defiance. Nothing. I didn't mean anything. You heard it wrong. But his eyes darted, too fast, too sharp, to the study door down the hall. A door he always kept locked. A door he insisted didn't matter. The officer caught the glance instantly. What's in that room? My husband swallowed. Too slow. Too visibly. Private files. My work. Nothing related to this. But the fear in his voice cracked at the edges. 2 officers moved toward the study. He lunged slightly, not enough to attack, but enough to show panic. Don't open that. The officer closest to him stepped in, holding him back. The paramedic whispered to me, Ma'am, whatever he's hiding, it's not small. My knees nearly buckled, because I remembered that room. The strange noises. The nights he stayed awake inside it. The way he always emerged calmer, too calm, like something had been reset. And the warning he used to give me whenever I walked too close. Stay out of that room, Alara. For your own good. One officer tested the doorknob.
Locked.
He turned to the lead officer. We're breaching. My husband shouted. No. They kicked the door in. The crack of the wood echoed through the entire house. And when the door swung open, every officer froze. Every muscle in my body turned to ice. Because inside the room, what they found made my son's condition only the first of many horrors. The study door slammed against the wall, dust floating through the air like unsettled ghosts. 2 officers stepped inside first, and the moment their flashlights swept across the room, their expressions hardened into something between shock and dread. The paramedic moved closer behind me, almost instinctively protective. I couldn't see past the officers yet, but I could smell the room, a mix of metal, antiseptic, and something colder, like a place untouched by real life. One officer let out a slow exhale. You've got to be kidding me. Another whispered. This is a full behavioral monitoring setup. My heart climbed into my throat. I took a step forward, clutching Liam tighter. Monitoring? I asked. My voice felt too small in my own house. The officer gently guided me back. Ma'am, just wait. But my husband's reaction told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't furious. He wasn't panicking. He was calculating. His eyes darted wildly between the officers, the equipment, and the hallway, as if deciding which lie he could still salvage. "Those are research files," he snapped. "Private work. None of it concerns you." But the officers weren't listening to him anymore. One of them lifted a clipboard from a desk, the thick, industrial kind used in forensic labs. Rows of notes.
Dates.
Patterns. Checklists labeled compliance, test behavior, emotional response. And last line on the page. Subject, LW. My son's initials. My stomach dropped so violently I almost collapsed. The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, these aren't research notes. These are tracking logs." Another officer stepped toward a shelf lined with USB drives, stacked methodically. He held one up, all labeled by dates and names. My husband lunged. The officers restrained him instantly. I stared at the room, unable to look away. Charts on the wall. Printouts of heart rate patterns. Photos. A small device used for auditory response tests, one I'd never seen before. And then an officer's voice cut through the haze. "Ma'am, there's a file here labeled with your name." My husband stopped struggling. Everything went silent. Because whatever he'd been hiding, it wasn't just about Liam. It was about all of us. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A file with my name. The officer held it carefully, as if it were something fragile or explosive, maybe both. My husband stopped fighting the restraints. His chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. The officer glanced at me with quiet sympathy. "Ma'am, I need you to prepare yourself before I open this." I shook my head. "Open it." He did. Inside the folder were pages of observations, written in my husband's familiar handwriting. Every line detailed something I hadn't realized was being watched. What time I left for missions. How long I stayed asleep. My emotional responses in arguments. How often I checked on Liam at night. Which neighbors I spoke to. How many minutes I stayed in the grocery store. It wasn't love.
It wasn't partnership.
It was surveillance. My knees weakened. The paramedic caught my arm gently. The officer flipped to the last page, one marked with a red tab. At the top, in bold letters, Phase 3 Consideration, Behavioral Adjustment Plan. The room spun. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The officer read the details silently, and when he looked up, there was a kind of horror in his eyes. Before he could speak, my husband broke. "I did it for you," he shouted. "For US. You didn't see how unstable you were becoming, how distracted." His voice cracked. Desperate. Distorted. I had to monitor things. I had to adjust things. I had to keep control. There was no other way. The officer cut him off sharply. "Sir, you were planning to manipulate your wife's behavior and restrict her movements. That is not protection. That is domestic coercion." My husband stopped speaking. The officers escorted him out of the house, not fighting anymore, just staring straight ahead, the mask finally gone. As they led him past me, he whispered hoarsely, "You ruined everything." But he was wrong. I knelt beside Liam as the paramedics carried him to the ambulance, brushing his hair gently off his forehead. His eyelashes fluttered, the faintest sign of him returning to me. The paramedic looked at me softly. "You saved him tonight. More than you know." Outside, the night air felt different, cold but clean.
Free.
My husband had spent years trying to control my life piece by piece. But the moment I walked through that door tonight, I stepped into the truth. And the truth set both me and my son free.